afternoon. It's, well, away from the holiday, back to work now, and we're here on Business Incorporated, 55 minutes of going around the world of business. This is what we have prepared for you for the next 55 minutes. It's name and shame in Zimbabwe. Rate debtors will be embarrassed. That's what they're threatening. We're also going to be discussing enabling state economy in Nigeria. Boosting revenue will focus on Nasarawa State. And some good news from South Africa. Eskom has achieved a level of energy security. You're welcome to the program. I'm Ini John Mekwa. We'll do business in the next 55 minutes, beginning from global space. We're talking about global oil now, and we see that prices rose on Thursday on the prospects of the United States that may start buying crude for its petroleum reserve after prices sank to a 7-week low on hopes for an Israel-Gaza ceasefire doubt. And then the U.S. interest rate cuts is also on the table as swelling oil inventories is also there. Snapping 3 days of losses, Brent crude futures for July gained 21 cents, that's about 0.3%, to $83.65 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude for June climbed 22 cents, that's about 0.3%, to $79.22 a barrel. Both benchmarks fell more than 3% on Wednesday to a 7-week low. The U.S. aims to replenish its strategic petroleum reserve, that's the SPR, after a historic sale from the emergency stockpile in 2022, and they want to buy back oil at $79 a barrel or less. In the Middle East, expectations grew that a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas could be in sight following a renewed push led by Egypt. Still, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to go ahead with a long-promised assault on the southern Gaza city of Rafah, despite the U.S. position and a UN warning that it could lead to tragedy. And then from there, let's head to the metal space and see what's going on there. Talking about metals now, gold prices edge higher for a second straight session on Thursday after the Federal Reserve indicated that it is still leaning toward eventual rate cuts, while investors pivoted toward the U.S. non-farm payrolls data, which is due on Friday. Spot gold firmed on 0.3% to $2,325.02 per ounce after climbing over 1% in the previous session. U.S. gold futures also went up 1% to $2,334.40. The Fed left interest rates unchanged on Wednesday. As expected, its latest policy statement kept key elements of its economic assessment and policy guidance intact, framing its discussions of interest rates around the conditions under which borrowing costs can be lowered. Still in that space, that's the metal space. Now we're discussing lithium this afternoon. We put our eyes there, and a couple of days ago in Nigeria, the Vice President, Kashim Shettima, said that plans are on the way for the country to produce about 4,000 metric tons of lithium every day. Let's look at the prospects of that. So, well, some people will ask, what have we done with other areas that have already been discovered? But let's speak to Halima. Now, Halima Dedinro is an analyst, financial derivatives company, and joins us to share the thoughts of FDC. Hi, Halima. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ini.
All right, so do tell us, normally we're supposed to get excited because lithium is an important thing at this time when we're discussing electric vehicles and batteries. We know this is a major raw material for it. And now the Vice President has said that Nigeria is looking that way. But really, what's the assurance that this will go beyond the words?
Okay, so just like you rightly said, lithium is used for batteries, for solar, mobile phone, electric vehicles, as you rightly said. And so the outlook for the demand for lithium is very positive in the coming year. And Nigeria luckily has a good reserve of this commodity, and not only lithium, so many other minerals. And we've seen that Nasarawa, for instance, has about 15,000 tons of reserve that has been discovered. And this is a commercial volume, which is very, very commendable. And not only that, Ekiti State and so many other states too has a large significant reserve of this commodity, and so which is very good in terms of potential revenue for the country. And just recently, we'll see that the federal government launched like a $250 million factory in Nasarawa, which is to produce lithium as well. And so I think this is a good move for the country, because presently the import bills on batteries is very high compared to what we export. And so I think this will help in reducing our import bill, and it could also reduce the pressure on the exchange rates, because there is no import without the usage of exchange rates. So it's a good one in terms of revenue, in terms of exchange rate stability for the country, and in terms of shifting away from fossil fuel into decarbonization, which is a global goal for greener energy. So I think it's a good one for Nigeria, and we have the potential in terms of reserves and deposits in various parts of the country.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you noted, there's so many things that Nigeria has potential for, but not explored. So I guess when it comes to Nigeria, looking this way, this is a long-term plan, because we have not even started building that factory yet. You know, but let's look at the price from global, especially of what's going on with lithium.
Presently, it has dropped by about over 80% to around like $15,000 per ton. And this is because of supply glut globally, especially in the Asian region. We've seen that people, investors in the oil and gas are also shifting into the exploration of lithium because of the viability of the commodity. And so this is causing an increase in supply of this commodity. And we all know that the supply and demand dynamics really tends to determine the price of a commodity. So this is one of the reasons. And not only that, we see that electric vehicle in the global space, the demand is also declining, because China, which is one of the second largest economy, is not really doing well in terms of economic performance. And so this is also trickling down into other sectors in the economy. And not only that, we also have interest rate hike. There's no way you would be able to expand your production when interest rate is very high. So the high interest rate environment is also really weighing on investment in lithium and electric vehicles and all. So this is really affecting the price of lithium in the global space. And we are likely to see this continue till we see a peak in the performance of the Chinese economy, and then a peak in the demand for electric vehicle moving forward.
Yeah, talking about electric vehicle, what's that doing, obviously, to the demand of lithium? I'm sure that's increasing. So I just wonder why the price is dropping. Maybe you should help us understand the full picture.
Generally, the price of lithium is dropping because the demand for the commodities being used to produce is dropping, like electric vehicle, like I rightly said. So because that is dropping, it is affecting the demand, which is lithium, a raw material in producing electric vehicle, because of poor economic performance. And like I also said, there is glut supply of lithium in the global space. So this will definitely drive down, because what is demanded is lesser than what is being supplied in the global space. So we all know that it will definitely drive down the price of the commodity.
All right. Halima, thank you so much. Halima Adediran is an analyst with Financial Derivatives Company, sharing that perspective with us. Moving on, the Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporation, NDIC, has increased the maximum coverage of all deposit-taking financial institutions across all levels. The managing director of the NDIC, Hassan Bello, made this known in Abuja today and said that the coverage has been increased, the maximum deposit insurance coverage of deposit money banks, that's the DMBs, from 500,000 to 5 million naira, which would provide full coverage of 98.98% of total depositors, compared with the current cover of 89.20%. The MD said in terms of the value of deposit covered, the revised coverage would increase the value of deposit covered by deposit insurance to 25.37%, compared with the current cover of 6.31% of total value of deposit. For microfinance banks, the maximum deposit insurance coverage was increased from 200,000 to 2 million naira and would provide full coverage of 99.27% of the total depositors, compared with the current level of 98.76%, and would increase the value of deposits covered by deposit insurance to 34.43%, compared with 14.38%, which is the current status. So, I mean, as the banks get ready to recapitalize, we also see more needed for the insurance. Giving more confidence to depositors, I believe, is the name of the game here. Let's do some corporate earnings now. Transcorp Group has sustained revenue growth of 173% and profit before tax of 45 billion naira for the first quarter of this year, 2024. The financial results for the period ended March 31st, 2024, unaudited result, shows revenue rising to 88.6 billion naira from 32.4 billion in 2023. That represents 173% increase. The results are largely driven by 209 year-on-year revenue growth within the power business, highlighting significant strategic progress as part of Transcorp Group's implementation of its integrated power strategy. The hospitality business recorded a 68% year-on-year growth in revenue, driven by an increase in occupancy rate from 75% to 82%, and that's compared to the previous year. Highlights of Transcorp Group results shows more there on your screen. Revenue up 88.6 billion. That's the increase of 173. Operating income also increased 479% from 8.5 billion to 49.1 billion. All of this for the first quarter of 2021. 2024, I beg your pardon. All right, now let's go to the States now and see what's happening there. We talked about lithium, and Nasarawa State is one of those states rich in lithium. Let's find out what they're doing. I know that they're having a summit this month, I believe from the 15th, where they want to discuss this and a whole lot more. So joining us to see perhaps what they would do and improve doing business, the ease of doing business. They are big on industrialization, but we know that industrialization is based on infrastructural development, power, roads, and all of that. But we're having a conversation now with the Managing Director of the Nasarawa Investment and Development Agency, Mr. Ibrahim Abdullahi, joins us from our Abuja studio. Mr. Abdullahi, good afternoon. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So we discussed lithium before you came on air. I hope you heard a bit about that. And that obviously is a product that is becoming, a resource that is becoming very popular in the days of electric vehicles, the batteries and all of that. And Nasarawa is one of those states enriched in that. Have you discovered that yet? Are you working on developing the potential around that?
Of course, when you talk about lithium mining in Nigeria today, Nasarawa State is the place to be. There is a lithium rush currently in the state, and the government, under the leadership of Governor Abdullahi Sule, is working around the clock to ensure that this is not lost in us as a people, that the companies who come to do lithium mining also do value addition, because without the value addition, much is not given back to the state or the country. That has been the major problem in the mining sector in the country, where our natural resources are being taken out without recourse to any value addition, so jobs are not being created, and our people are not better for it. Yes, there is a lithium rush in Nasarawa State, and the state government is working very hard with different state actors to ensure that our business environment is improved for all of these investments that are coming in within the sector.
It would be a beautiful thing when we see states explore the potentials under the ground, add value, and then increase their revenue. And Nasarawa State, being specific now, you are big on industrialization. Even the theme for your upcoming summit is talking about industrialization. But I mean, when we talk about, in reality now, industrialization, and we look at the infrastructure that is needed, I'm sure you will push most of those responsibilities to the federal government. You know, you want to talk about power, even the power now, the new law allows states to delve into that, talk about roads and all of that. So how are you as Nasarawa State making this conversation much more than a conversation, but a reality? That's talking about industrialization.
Well, the first thing we did in Nasarawa State when the Governor Abdullahi Sule came into office in 2019 is to get policy right, because we were known to always be a civil service state, and the economy largely being propelled by activities of civil servants and workers. So we launched a policy called the NASA Economic Development Strategy, and that is all anchored on a very big ambition of revitalizing the economy of Nasarawa State, especially leveraging private sector capital and private sector expertise. You cannot revitalize your economy or have a private sector-led economy if the key enablers for growth, for industrialization are not put in place. And the first and most important thing government did was to make sure that we get the policy right. We embarked on the most ambitious enabling business environment reforms, looking at all the barriers that continue to impede doing business in our state and unblocking those barriers, creating institutions and centers of excellence that will build on this policy formulation and ensure that they translate into tangible results that will improve the lives of citizens and residents in the state. That is the reason why we have had a very big focus on getting private investments into the state, both domestic and foreign. We believe that the government cannot do it alone. We need the partnership of the private sector, and to get the private sector into the states, to get the private sector excited, you have to get policy right. You have to set up the right institutional and policy mechanism to ensure that you are not just talking, but there are visible and tangible actions being promoted by government itself. So the governor is leading from the front in this regard. You would see that in recent years, since 2019, there's been an influx of investments in Nasarawa State, both domestic and foreign investments. And this is a new dawn for Nasarawa State. And we're also saying that whatever is happening, the industrial renaissance happening in Nasarawa State, it can be replicated all across the country. And Nasarawa State is working to be a shining example of how subnationals can grow. There are a couple of things that are working to our advantage. As I've said earlier, one is policy and political will. We have a leadership that understands the role of the private sector in revitalizing our local economy. We also have natural resources. Nasarawa State is one of the most mineralized states in the country, and we also have one of the best arable land for agriculture. We also have geography. By virtue of geography, we're right in the middle of the country, so we're a center of excellence and a gateway to many Nigerian states. And the fourth factor playing to our advantage is people. We have a great people, diverse culture from different parts of the country. If you go down Karo, Maraba in Karo local government, you would see all kinds of Nigerians living in that area. So we have all of these advantages, and we are very keen and we're very optimistic to lead Nigeria's industrial renaissance.
Yeah, well, I know this will form a basis for your conversation at your summit, and we certainly wish you the best and look forward to, taking the conversation outside the summit to the reality and, making it into revenue. Well, thank you so much, the Managing Director of Nasarawa Investment and Development Agency, Mr. Ibrahim Abdullahi, and wish you the very best as you prepare for your summit.
Thank you all, and I invite everyone to join us at the Nasarawa Investment Summit on the 15th and 16th of May.
All right, thanks a lot. We'll try to be there. Now let's take a break, do some commercials, and then we'll head into the markets. So stay with us. Welcome back to Watching Business Incorporated right here on Channels Television. We head to the market. We have a green with Anete Edet. Anete, congratulations.
Yes, Ini, I can see you're smiling. You're beaming with smiles, and that's because of the green color of Nigeria. Nigeria, of course, that's our national color.
We have to share it with South Africa also, so we see green going like that.
And it's not just the Nigeria stock markets, as well as we track about 4 major markets.
And they're all green today?
Exactly, except for just one.
Though. This is intraday before we get too excited.
And the first for most of the markets around the world. Yesterday was Workers' Day, so it was a public holiday. Yes. So around the world, Workers' Day, they just had to take that break, but we were here on duty, still doing what we know how to do best, which is information delivery, and as well as other services which is related to the media. So we're never on break except for our own vacations. So that's
essential worker.
Essential workers. Mm-hmm. You got that right. All right. So now, for our viewers around the world, this is intraday figures for major indexes around the African continent. Starting first, charity begins at home, starting with Nigeria, 0.38%. Of course, we closed the month of April, the last trading day, which was April the 30th, with a slight increase at the close of Tuesday's trading session. But so far, the month of April was mostly in the red because it went for about around 6.2% in the red. So we saw lots of profit taking as well as so many other factors that played into the market. But so far, starting of the month of May, we're in the green, and the market at intraday still oscillating, flip-flopping, lots of bargain hunting as well as sell pressure still going around until 2:30 when the market closes. So at intraday, 98,596.81, that was the number that we last tracked a couple of minutes ago, about an hour ago, while the South Africa JSE was in the green more than 0.25%, 0.3% at intraday. So that's it for that market. Let's move over to the other side of the market. We see another green color there for the Egyptian Stock Exchange, the EGX 30. 2.35%, that's a whopping gain for the Egyptian Stock Exchange at about 25,863.79. But for the Kenya Stock Exchange, it closed the last trading day of April, which is the number which we're still tracking on Tuesday, 0.24%. That's just about 0.25% in the red. Now, let's take our let's take our focus on Nigerian banks, which April the 30th was the deadline for the submission of their recapitalization plan. And that is one of the reasons why the market has been in the red, or one of the reasons I mentioned, because there have been other factors, particularly the high inflation environment, the high monetary policy environment, which has not been a cause to smile for some investors as well as some of the traders there. So now we'll be talking more about the banks, as well as some latest earnings which have trickled in so far, the first quarter earnings. Now let's bring in Abiodun Adedotun, equity trader at FBN Quest, for more details about that. Thank you for joining us, Abiodun.
Yeah, good afternoon. Nice being here, Victor.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're starting off the month of May. It's there's a popular slogan that says, "Sell in May and go away." But we saw that so much of sellings in the month of April, about minus 6.3% now. But the signage of all eyes is on the banking sector. Now, can you tell us more about this recap plan? How did it go? So, because we had some reports that about 7 banks had submitted their plans. So, how is this coming out into the market, as well as the earnings from Access Bank and others for this first quarter?
Okay, in terms of the recapitalization plan for the banks, those plans, of course, they will be submitted to the apex regulator, which is the central bank, and over time we'll continue to get guidance. But one thing I would like to say is this: the central bank was pretty much clear in terms of what they want the banks to do. For the tier 1 banks, they want them to raise 500 billion into shareholders' funds, and all graduated like that for the national banks, even up to the merchant banks as well. So the plan for the recapitalization is clear. The banks have about 24 months till March 31st, 2026 to be able to come up with it. There's still pretty much ample time, but one thing you would also want to be careful is, where is the money going to come from? It's a lot of money. We're talking north of 2 trillion when you look at the entire banking industry. And knowing fully well that the resources are a bit limited, you still have other corporates like MTN, Dangote, and a few that might also be looking at, tapping into various form of security in coming months, in coming weeks and co. So it's more about how attractive select counters are going to be versus where investors will be pitching their tent with.
Okay, so now let's pause a bit for that for the banks and talk about the intraday market analysis, and then of course the outlook for the first trading day of May. How are the stocks performing? Because I can see on my radar here, Access Bank, Cadbury, Julie PLC, ABC, Presco, Transcorp, and FTN Cocoa all just recently released their first quarter results. So how's the market playing, and what is the intraday numbers before the close of Thursday's trading session?
The intraday number is actually looking pretty good right now as I speak. The market is on. Not so much volumes are going through. I think maybe more like sellers are applying a little bit of brakes, in terms of position. Also, there's a little bit of optimism here and there, especially led by the banks. Of course, Access, GTCO, majorly the banking counters. They are looking up, and we've seen a bit of recovery in Dangote sugar, Pretty much there's a little bit of optimism here and there, and one would expect that the market is going to close this way by the end of today.
Okay, Abiodun, I think we'll leave it there, and of course be hopeful that the market ends in the green. At least a very good way to start the month of May. But we thank you for your analysis. That was Abiodun Adedotun, equity trader at FBN Quest, with the market numbers at intraday. Now let's talk about the Middle Eastern indexes. We see a bit of a mixed picture for most of the GCC stocks. Take a look at the board there. A mixed picture for the Abu Dhabi, on the United Arab Emirates, as well as the Dubai. Just what you call a positive flat for the market at intraday. But of course, these numbers, they're changing by every minute by minute and by the seconds. And for the Dubai FM, in the red, 0.06% at intraday. For the other side of the market, Egypt, the Saudi Stock Exchange, very much in the green. They'll just call it a marginal gain at intraday, 0.10%, while the Qatari Stock Exchange down by a little bit more than 1%. And that's because there's so much of a bargain hunting as well as the impact of some sell pressure there. Now, let's move over to the world's biggest economy, the U.S. stock market. Yesterday, the U.S. Federal Reserve had announced that it's holding on its interest rate at between 5 and 5.2%. So no change for the interest rate, and that was widely expected. So for the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500, as well as the NASDAQ, we see green colors all around there, 0.47%, 0.7%, and almost 1% for the NASDAQ. So now for the market, they were expecting, the market traders are still expecting that a rate cut wouldn't come until at least about September later this year. That's according to the latest market pricing figures as measured by the CME Group. So they expected that, although the U.S. Federal Reserve's chairman, Jerome Powell, has also mentioned that the optimism for this rate cut is not too much to be expected. But of course, there was no change for that. But what are we to expect? For Thursday, the market will be expecting economic data on weekly jobless claims, as well as the first quarter worker productivity and unit labor costs, as well as the March figures on the trade deficit and factory orders. Those releases will come ahead of Friday's closely watched April jobs report for the U.S. market, as well as the Thursday quarterly earnings report, which is going to be dominated by Apple and Amgen, as well as the Coinbase and DraftKings. So that's it for the U.S. market for now, and that's the world's biggest market, because whatever happens in the U.S. always has its own effect around the rest of the world.
Whatever happens to the dollar affects every economy.
Exactly. That's the world's #1 currency.
All right, Annie, thank you so much for that.
Pleasure.
All right, moving on now, we go to Europe, where we have Chiponda joining us now. Germany's foreign minister has called for EU reform for more security collaboration as the bloc marks 20 years since the bloc's enlargement to the east. Enlargement has been a major topic in the EU following that Russia's full-scale invasion. As we know, Ukraine is looking for how to get in on different fronts. But let's have Chiponda give us the details now. Hi, Chip. Good afternoon. So what can you tell us about this ongoing enlargement efforts?
Thanks for having me. Well, the war in Ukraine has put the focus on EU enlargement. Countries are lining up to join, not just for economic reasons, but more so security. That has become more apparent since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. On Wednesday, Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said that Europe needs to become a security union. And that's because several countries that share borders with Russia fear that they too, like Ukraine, may be invaded. There are 8 countries in line to join the European Union. Among them, Ukraine, against which Russia is waging a war, and of course 2 other countries that share a border with it. Moldova and Georgia are also EU accession candidates. But the appetite to grant these countries EU membership isn't big because there are many issues that need to be ironed out.
You should help us understand some of those issues, Chip. What's really stopping this enlargement?
Among the bigger challenges are the economic ones. The 8 countries in line to join the EU are all poorer than the member states. Admitting them would mean that countries that now receive EU funds to support their economies would have to turn into donors for the new members. That makes admitting the countries less attractive. While the EU could afford to admit some of the smaller candidate countries like Montenegro, granting membership to a big country like Ukraine would weigh on its finances. Ukraine has the biggest population among the countries lining up, and it has the lowest GDP. Billions of euros would be needed to reconstruct the country, which has faced major damages to its infrastructure in the war with Russia. But that's not the only deterrent to admit Ukraine. The EU's biggest agricultural producers fear that Ukrainian food exports would be unwelcome competition. For instance, Poland's role as one of the bloc's most competitive food producers could be threatened. And we have seen that in recent months, Polish farmers have protested at the borders and in Warsaw against cheap Ukrainian grain imports.
Yeah, Chip, I do remember that protest by some farmers, from the EU and all of that. But let's head to the markets. How's that looking?
Well, European stocks are expected to be mixed today. That's because after the US Central Bank left interest rates on hold, and Fed Chair Jerome Powell signaled that the Fed wouldn't be raising rates. Now, that's despite the uncertainty around bringing down inflation. In terms of data, PMIs are expected for Germany, France, Spain, and the Eurozone today. And later, traders will be on the lookout for US March trade balance, factory orders, and initial job claims. Company earnings today will include Apple. So investors will be watching those results very closely because there are expectations that there will be a significant drop in iPhone sales in China.
Yeah, China again. But thank you so much, Chip, for that update. Now let's move on from there, come to Nigeria, where telecom operators are asking the federal government for approval to raise their tariffs. Everybody is raising tariff. Reported earnings by listed telecom operators have shown a decline in revenue and rising operating costs. We had Mr. Bismarck Rwani, the Chief Executive Officer of Financial Derivatives Company, on Business Morning earlier today, and he shed some light on this.
Says from hero to zero.
Right.
This sector, quoted and unquoted, has provided a lot of income for people, for individuals, for households, for collective investor schemes, for everybody, for taxes for the government. So all of a sudden, that MTN had their EGM and the AGM and no dividend. In 2022, 454 billion naira dividend paid to shareholders. This year, zero. Now, so what's the impact of this? This sector is in decline. 11 years ago was when they had a price review. 11 years ago, who was the president of Nigeria? Goodluck Jonathan. But what it tells you is that if you ask yourself, and that you went back to 11 years ago, right? And look at those prices, and see there's an industry where there's been no price review in 11 years, what do you expect to happen? So what has happened? The quality of service, the drop calls, right? The effective linkages between this sector and the rest of the economy is beginning to unravel. So if nothing happens, if you stay where you are, if you remain static on this whole pricing mechanism, you'll find that this economy is heading downwards and not keep the pricing of any commodity or any service static for 11 years.
Well, I guess consumers should expect once there's a hike in operational costs, it will trickle down. Who pay for it? Obviously, the consumers, unfortunately. Now we move from Nigeria to Zimbabwe, where the name of the game seems to be name and shame. The city of Harare has threatened to name and shame ratepayers with outstanding debts in a radical debt recovery strategy. The council is owed in excess of 940 million ZiG by residents, businesses, parastatals, and government departments. Council spokesperson Stanley Gama said the money was needed to run the city's operations and to cater for service delivery that they have since started issuing final demands and summons to debtors. He further said that names of debtors would be posted on social media platforms and at all district offices. I don't want to imagine what this would look like. From there, we go to South Africa. It's a bit of good news right there because the Minister in the Presidency for Electricity, Dr. Goshen Tesho Ramakopa, says that the end of load shedding is within touching distance. He said this after Eskom achieved an energy availability factor of 65.5%. And they had this yesterday. This marks a significant milestone in resolving the energy deficit load shedding in the country's Eskom. Still in South Africa now, another good news as we see the South African rand has strengthened after the United States Federal Reserve held interest rates steady as expected and reiterated inflationary concerns. In early trade, the rand was at 18.50 against the dollar. That's a 0.68% value added than at the previous close. The dollar index was last trading down 0.1% against a basket of currencies. And then let's just head to Egypt before we head to the crypto space there. The central bank has announced the issuance of 546-day Treasury zero-coupon bonds worth 5 billion Egyptian pounds, and that is on the website of the central bank. The Ministry of Finance has authorized the CBE to manage its offerings of Treasury bills and bonds in Egyptian pounds throughout the fiscal year to fund the general budget for 2023-2024. Zero-bond T-bills, T-bonds at this point do not pay interest, but reward investors with a higher principal return at maturity. So Ladi has a guest in the house. We need to give him extra time today. I don't know about the color on the board, but Ladi.
Well, we're seeing some kind of rebound, at this time. We've seen the post-halving rise there that everyone's expecting. You're expecting some kind of post-halving pump, but that's not happening, at this time. We've seen a downward trend.
Yeah, I think your analysts, a lot of your analysts have said it to take about 6 months or more before we see that huge surge that we're expecting.
And as you can expect, investors are already feeling afraid, at this time. But it's neutral. But it's tending towards fear.
Yeah, I think this your index sometimes is deceptive because sometimes we do have greed.
Right.
And then the number is not really looking greedy. And it's also not a good time. Greed is supposed to be a good time for you to be able to take profit.
Right.
But sometimes you see the market is greedy, but it's not wise to take profit.
Yeah, it's not wise to take profit, but sometimes being wise and in taking profit depends on who the investor is. Because some investors...
I'm the investor in this case.
It depends on what kind of profit they see. But let's get a check on the market now. We see Bitcoin there still trading around that $50,000 level. Late 50s, almost around 60,000. But we've lost that 60K level for now. 57,000, up about 0.42% this afternoon. Ethereum is below that $3,000 mark. $2,940, up 1.89%. So we're seeing a bounce right now in the market after a lot of sell-offs. We're seeing Cardano, 44 cents, 4.20% up. XRP, 51 cents, 4.36%. Let's get a check on the top headlines. Now we see spot Bitcoin ETFs in the United States have recently observed a noteworthy outflow this time. We're seeing BlackRock spot Bitcoin ETF. We know the ETFs, it was all about the ETFs, and we saw, Bitcoin get to new highs, about $72,000. So we're seeing outflows from those ETFs at this time. Also, we're seeing NFT sales in April. Yeah, there was a time NFTs were really hot in this market. It's down over 30%. That was in April. So we're seeing a downward trend when it comes to activity in that NFT space and spot volumes at this time. We also see Bitfinex saying that the BTC post-halving price drop could last about 2 months. Bitfinex, one of the top exchanges right there in the crypto space. So these are top headlines right now. Let's bring in Rume Dominic, not the Rume you normally get here. He's the founder of Vorum and the Deputy Managing Director, Aviate Industries, joining me right here in the studio. Great to have you, Rume, and definitely these headlines right there, they're mostly bearish, at this point. And seeing that the post-halving price is not what investors, were expecting, we're seeing a drop right now in Bitcoin, and some were expecting some kind of, post-halving pump. So how are you seeing the market at this time?
13 days ago, when this Bitcoin halving happened, we've seen a really good drop in the price of Bitcoin, especially in the price action. And one of the major things that happened, especially with the halving, is that it actually affects the supply of the Bitcoin, the way at which it's being produced. So let's imagine that the miners are able to produce about 900 Bitcoins every 10 minutes. It will drop to about 450 in that space of time. And a lot of investors have been disappointed because of the price drop. But they fail to understand that for every halving event that has happened, it took about 6 months for Bitcoin to actually hit a new all-time high, and then another 18 days to double that all-time high. Now, this situation is a very unique and interesting one.
Right.
What happened is that Bitcoin actually hit its all-time high before the halving event, and right now, we are looking at a situation where Bitcoin is able to double that same all-time high, now in a space of, let's say, about 18 days as well. So right now, investors might be angry, not happy.
Because they're neutral when you look at the fear greed index, tending towards fear at this time.
But in the words of a wise man, Warren Buffett, he says, buy when the market is fearful and sell when the market is excited. Right now, because the fear and greed index is reading at a low value and is saying extreme fear, it is a time to buy.
Right, and definitely buying is another, question at this point, because there's a cost of living crisis right now, and we know that some investors are really, really squeezed at this time. So some might be really afraid to part with their funds, right now to try and, invest in most of these markets, because at the same time, you could catch a falling knife. So definitely a lot of research, has to be done before you get into, buying any dip in this market. How are you seeing that?
With a company like BlackRock getting involved with Bitcoin, there is the report and data showing that BlackRock scoops up about 6,000 Bitcoins on a daily basis. And that's where the company that I partner with, which is Aviot, they help people to be able to see that you don't get scared of infusing your money into this market, because they help with things like fundraising, strategic partnerships, user interaction with the market, data analysis that helps you to be able to understand this fear and greed index that we spoke of earlier, and see that it is the right time to fix your money as a smart investor into the market, so that you can make money and profit before the end of the bull market.
And you need to get an advice, so that's for sure, because this market is not for the faint-hearted. Well, let's look at NFT sales. There was a time NFTs were really hot, in this market, but it's down about 30%. That's the volume we see with NFTs. So I'm thinking, are NFTs dead at this point?
NFTs are not dead at this point. However, there is a shift in the market and user acceptability of NFTs. This is where education plays a very important and pivotal role, especially with cryptocurrency and in investing. And one of the things we do at Vorem is to be able to see that we educate a lot of people to see that they can engage with the market and engage with projects that have good utility, good community, and then a good development team that is developing that project. Because, take for example, like the iPhone users and the Samsung users, because of the community, you might have a situation where there is a negative news on the Apple phone, and then the community comes out to defend that product. So in the case of NFTs, you must ensure that you are getting into a project that has high level community interaction, good utility, and a good development team to be able to take that project to the next phase, especially with the iterations, creativity, innovations that need to come on that project. If you don't have that, that's where you have a situation where most of the NFTs are coming down by 30%.
Right, and talking about most of the NFTs and the possibility of some of them, being dead at this time, I took a check at the CoinMarketCap, where you find all the cryptocurrencies, and I saw that there are over 2 million altcoins. And I'm asking myself, why do you need 2 million altcoins to do whatever cryptocurrency is supposed to do at this time? There was a time it was really hard for a project to actually get, listed on CoinMarketCap, but it seems now any cat, dog, or rabbit can just get listed on CoinMarketCap. How's the community seeing all of this?
Well, it's something that needs to be worked on and fixed, especially when you want to have integrity and strength of character with investors' funds. Prior to now, there used to be a lot of scrutiny for projects before they get on the public space like a CoinMarketCap, because investors use that particular platform or that aggregator, because the CoinMarketCap is an aggregator, to have a sense of trust for that project. But now, Because the things that I think most of the scrutiny have been, maybe they've had a bit of lackadaisical attitude. A lot of different projects have used money to buy their way. And then we have a lot of things like rug pull and honeypotting happening. And this is not good for the investor. We need to revisit the books and then be able to ensure that we set this trend straight so that we can leave a very good platform for the next generation to come on.
And talking about platforms, we know most of these platforms end up being, rug pulls. That's they just, get into that market, take people's funds, and they, run, at the end of the day. So talk to me about how, the community is looking at self-regulation, because regulating this industry is really hard. We've seen the SEC in the US, they've had problems with that. We've also seen what's happening to CZ, that's the former CEO of Binance. Yes. So talk to me about self-regulation. How's the community looking at, setting up a regulatory body that will actually, see that this industry can actually be well, regulated?
Regulation has been something that, every investor wants to protect his or her investment. No investor wants to go into a market where it is not regulated because the security of your funds are not guaranteed. In Nigeria, we've been able to take a front lead, especially with the development of the national blockchain policy that happened, to be able to see that we set a tone for the cryptocurrency and blockchain space here in Africa. Fortunately, we've seen a couple of things happen in the US with the Security Exchange Commission, and then even with the Binance that you spoke about, and then, the extradition for the Binance official here in Nigeria and the Interpol. These different events is in a bid to be able to see that the regulatory framework for the next generation is set. So we must continue to follow this very well and see that, okay, what are our contributions that we can give to be able to see that we help the people in top tiers of government? Because, my father always tells me that you can't beat the place of experience in the life of a man. So a lot of this Security Exchange Commission, most of the bodies that are trying to regulate this, they've not really partnered with institutions, private body, and people that are well experienced in terms of understanding what cryptocurrency is, the regulatory scope of it, and what has been done in other sectors as well. And that's where you have the CBAN, which is the Stakeholders of Blockchain Association here in Nigeria, as one of the executive bodies that has liaised with NITIDA, the National Communications Commission, to be able to see that we're able to have that type of regulatory framework going for investors and companies here in Nigeria.
Anyway, we'll keep tracking the sector to see how it grows, in Nigeria. Thank you so much. Great having you, roommate Dominic, founder at Vorum. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm grateful.
Yeah, so that's it now. It's all about what's going to happen, when it comes to regulation. 2023 was all about regulation. 2024 is also looking like it's going to be about regulation, definitely. So, there you have it. That's how the market is looking. We're seeing a slight rebound, at this time, but it's still looking quite bearish, in this market.
Yeah, but I have to tell you, the NGX recovered a bit. Even though we are not back to our normal levels.
Since April wasn't good for risk assets.
It wasn't good.
It wasn't a good month for risk assets.
Yeah, so I don't know if we're still going to sell in May and go away or not.
Right, sell in May and go away.
I don't know if
But I'm just going to go away right now.
All right, laddie. So that's it on the program. Thank you so much for being a part of Business Incorporated. We're back tomorrow. But before tomorrow, you can go to our website. That's youtube.com/channelsweb and watch Business Morning, Business Incorporated again. But I'm not done for the day. I see you at 10 p.m. with the Stock Market Report. I'm Ini John McQuarrie.